because you can do positive tapping too. We haven't done a lot of that, you and I, but you can create choices statements, and you can contrast the negative with the positive. There's little techniques that you can do. And by the fifth appointment, he was just like so happy and so excited and felt so good. And his anger was really behind him.
I think the reason why I started labeling emotions as bad is because, like, when I felt anger, it was almost always associated with outraged outbursts that were out of control.
Yeah.
I would have like a dissociated experience with rage, and they call it bipolar rage, which I don't like that, because this idea of bipolar rage, again, is disconnecting us from any responsibility, because you don't feel like you have any control over what's happening. But if you can learn to separate the emotion from what the action, and recognize anger is not a bad emotion, it's just information. But learning how to process those emotions in a healthy way, so that I'm not having outraged outbursts with my children and then feeling grief afterwards because I feel like a horrible person and I, just done this terrible thing. So how do you help people who are, struggling with those kinds of things? What is it what's your approach with them?
So let me give you an example of, you mentioned rage. So I had a client a few months ago, and he was dealing with anger management issues. And he was a friend in a different community, but he texted me and he said, "I'm afraid I'm going to wreck my kid." And he had a teenage son, and not physically, but he knew that his angry outbursts were affecting his relationship with his son, and he did not want that. He didn't want that to be either of their experiences. So we did, I think, 5 appointments, and the first 2 were dealing directly with the anger. So we just start right off with the emotion, and then usually within a few minutes, a memory, I would say, share something with me, share a time with me where you experienced, real anger. One of the experiences that came out, and because I've done this for so long now, I can hear things without being like, but a part of me was like, oh my gosh, that's so terrible. He had a couple of brothers, and he was the youngest brother, and he was like, I think he said 10, and they dragged him outside and turned him upside down and dumped him on his head on the concrete, which, first of all, the helplessness of that feeling, the fact that it's your brothers who you would hope would love and protect you, and then the physical impact of your head hitting the concrete, and possible damage to your neck, and like all of that. And then the feelings that he had after that. And so we just like tore it apart into pieces and worked on each of those parts, how he felt toward his brother, his feelings of abandonment, just there were so many emotions that came up around it. And so by the time we got to the third appointment, we were resolving the rest of that. And I said, what would you like to feel instead? So this kind of points back to that idea of being in the driver's seat. And he said, I want to live a life of joy. And, I get emotional thinking about it, because here he had been bound to his anger and imprisoned by it, and acting in ways that weren't in integrity for how he wanted to live in the world and show up in the world, especially with his family. And so we did because you can do positive tapping too. We haven't done a lot of that, you and I, but you can create choices statements, and you can contrast the negative with the positive. There's little techniques that you can do. And by the 5th appointment, he was just like so happy and so excited and felt so good. And his anger was really behind him. It doesn't mean he's never going to get angry again. There will be things that, and it is kind of like working with an onion. You peel off some layers, and it makes it safe for some more layers to come up sometimes. And so that's why it can take several appointments, but sometimes it happens quickly, and I can never guess if it's going to take a long time or not. And then just with my own experience with my mother's suicide, there was a lot of shame in that. there was a lot of grief because of the time that was lost between their divorce and what happened. And then, the way that I felt like I managed and other people managed the information that was given, that I had this relationship now. And there was, hatred and anger, and there was so much there. And it was probably about a year into my learning about EFT and starting my training and stuff. I went to an EFT conference. They told us that we might be triggered. And that's kind of what happened. I got triggered with the people there working with others on stage, and they had a system for that. So I went out and got some help. But in my room that night, I was like, I think I know enough to manage this. I think I can do this. And so I worked on all of those memories specifically around the phone call where I found out she had passed, and was free from it. And also, my older children had a completely different experience with their mother than my younger children did. You mentioned I have 7 children, and, they do the joke all the time that, oh, you're so much easier on them and stuff. But honestly, it's because I was a lot more in control of myself and my emotions, a lot more calm. It's funny to me that people who meet me in person and spend any amount of time with me, they're like, you're so calm. And I always laugh, because I think if they only had known me 20 years ago, they'd be like, that chick is flying off the handle. What is her problem?
Yeah.
And that is the difference that it makes when you have a tool like this that you can use.